Welcome, everyone, to First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. So glad to have you here. And if you are here for the first time, we do something different in the summertime. This is our second summer forum, and we do this all through the summer. September through June, we have our regular services. I'm Steve Glaser, member of the congregation, and Doug Owens, a member of the Utah Legislature, is our speaker today, and I'm going to be introducing him in detail shortly. But first, Darlene Thayne is going to light our chalice.
Good morning, everyone. First, a thoughtful comment from Sir David Attenborough, a British broadcaster, biologist, natural historian, and writer. It seems to me that the natural world is the greatest source of excitement, the greatest source of visual beauty, the greatest source of intellectual interest. It is the greatest source of so much in life that makes life worth living. Next, a warning from poet Jane Hirshfield. Let them not say we did not see it, we saw. Let them not say we did not hear it, we heard. Let them not say they did not taste it, we ate, we trembled. Let them not say it was not spoken, not written. We spoke, we witnessed with voices and hands. Let them not say they did nothing, we did not enough. Let them say, as they must say something, a kerosene beauty, it burned. Let them say we warmed ourselves by it, read by its light, praised, and it burned.
Thank you, Darlene. So, Representative Doug Owens is an attorney with over 30 years of experience in resolving intricate commercial, environmental, and employment disputes. He was born and raised in Salt Lake. He holds degrees from the University of Utah and Yale Law School. He lives in Mill Creek with his wife, Cynthia Smart Owens. And he is the founder of Utah Outdoor Partners, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about the value of Utah's outdoor spaces and advocating for the development of parks, trails, and recreational infrastructure to keep pace with our state's population growth. He became a member of the legislature in 2021, representing District 33, which is primarily in Mill Creek. He's dedicated to enhancing education, bolstering Utah's economy, safeguarding our air quality, and preserving the unique aspects of Utah that make it special. In his legislative capacity, he's introduced bills aimed at preserving the Great Salt Lake and Utah's water resources. He also works tirelessly to ensure that Utah's tribal nations have a strong connection with elected officials and places a high priority on preserving public lands. Representative Owens serves as the co-chair of the Great Salt Lake Caucus and the Bipartisan Clean Air Caucus. My first encounter with him was at a town hall in Holiday back in 2023. This was a town hall focused on the Great Salt Lake. It was organized by the Youth Coalition for Great Salt Lake, and that's an organization that came out of our congregation. They were going to have a table in Elliott Hall afterwards. And there were a half dozen members of the legislature present, but Representative Owens stood out for being both extremely well informed on the issue and also for telling the story about how the lake had so quickly captured the attention of his fellow lawmakers at that time. And I thought that was extraordinary given how our legislature is not known for its regard for what we consider environmental issues. And so that was the inspiration for inviting him to this series. He doesn't remember this, by the way. We were talking this morning. Okay. But let's welcome him.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for being here. It's nice to see such an energetic group of people on a beautiful summer Sunday morning. I've been here before a million years ago when my dad, some of you are old enough to remember my dad, a guy named Wayne Owens, and I know Tim and Kathy especially. He was a wonderful guy and deserves that round of applause. And I came, and when my first visit here was when he was speaking here. It's a beautiful chapel. You know, I remember a time when my dad ran for governor in 1984, lost by 12 points to Norm Bangerter. And he was reading an exit poll result from Dan Jones back in the day. The press used to pay for these big polls. It's all gone now. But he was reading the poll, and he said, "Oh, I got 40% of the Mormons." There was a breakout by religion who had voted for him. He said, "I got 40% of the Mormons, 55% of the Catholics, and I think I'm getting these about right. 70% of the Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians, 90% of the Unitarians, and 100% of the atheists." And so he said, "Thank God for the atheists." That's an absolutely true story. Not exaggerated. But glad to be here. So I want you to emerge from this meeting armed with some mechanisms for you to use your energy to push for conservation in Utah. But I want to educate you first about the way I've learned over the last 5 years things are working on Capitol Hill. So I'm going to give you some war stories, some particular issues, and you'll see a theme emerge, which is economic influence, okay? That's what really moves the needle in Utah. So I want to, but let's ground this in the discussion of the Great Salt Lake in particular. Currently, the lake is at 4192, the level, 0.4 feet, which is down about a foot from where it was at a high point a couple months ago. So we lose typically, it's like it breathes, right? It loses elevation over the summer. It goes down about 2.5 feet on average over the summer. And we're having a hot, dry summer. So it is down about a foot from where it was. And that is up about 5 feet currently from where it was at its all-time low about 4 years ago. And you may recall that's when I got the helicopters, the Army helicopters, to fly everybody in the legislature right from Capitol Hill early in the morning to go see the Great Salt Lake at its low point. Very sobering experience that we had. A healthy level, the minimum healthy level for the lake, 4198. So we're 5 feet currently below that. But we're going to wind up, to another 1.5 feet lower in September. And that's, so that would put us about 6 feet below where we need to be for a minimum healthy level. The average level is even another 9 feet on top of that, 4207. So currently 52% of the lake bed exposed, 1,137 square miles of lake bed. It's interesting, Owens Lake, no relation, in Southern California, which they desiccated the valleys east of the mountains there, the Sierra Mountains, to get water to go down south to LA, right? You know the story in Chinatown, that great movie. So that's that whole east side of the mountain. There's no water used for farming, and it's all channeled to LA, and they drained Owens Lake essentially and had a dust mitigation. It's 40 square miles, okay? Did you hear that number I just read you? 1,100 miles currently exposed. 40 miles down there, they've spent $1.5 billion on dust remediation. We will never be able to afford dust remediation on the Great Salt Lake. So very sobering reality, and the reality that when saline lakes have gotten in trouble globally, none of them has ever gotten out of trouble. So we need to make a difference here and save that lake. I want to point out a few successes that I've been able to have relating to the lake, and then you'll see this theme emerge. I got legislation through to keep motorized vehicles off the lake bed because you don't want that crust to break up and make dust, be exposed to dust creation. Got money for air monitoring, got some money for split season water leasing so farmers can send water to the lake, which can be a useful but small component of saving the lake. Phragmites elimination, the invasive plant there's probably 40 to 50,000 acres of Phragmites plants that don't belong in this area, use a lot of water, and almost more importantly, block fresh water from entering the lake because it'll pool up behind it and create more avenues for evaporation. Most of these haven't cost much money. Economics is going to be the theme that emerges here. More expensive things have been done by Republican leadership. This has been a bipartisan issue. The last year, not this last session this year, but the previous year, the Speaker of the House personally went after the mineral extraction companies and put a statute into place with other Republican leaders, Casey Snyder, a great friend of the lake, to curtail the use of water when the lake goes below a certain level by mineral extraction companies. They use a sizable percentage of the lake water and have rights to use a lot more than they have historically, kind of frightening numbers if you look at them. So it curtailed their usage of the water when the lake was low. The Republican majority agreed 4 years ago, the year we did the helicopter flights, to put a lot of money, $250 million, into buying secondary meter systems for people who have a secondary water system when you don't use your in-house water, the same culinary water, to water your yards. That's predominantly Utah County and then Davis and Weber where they do that. We don't do that much in Salt Lake County. And the theory being that if people know how much water they use, they will automatically start using less. But more importantly, it put the mechanism in place to begin charging people for their water use. It was historically been a flat rate. You paid $50 or $75 and you could turn your sprinklers on in April and not turn them off till September or October. And no, it didn't cost you any incremental money. Obviously, economically illiterate policy applying to water. So, and then this last year, Casey Snyder, I mentioned a friend who got legislation through to allow top tier of your water pricing to take into account conservation. That had not been allowable by law, that water pricing could take account of the need to pay for conservation projects. Also, the Republican majority created the Great Salt Lake Trust to buy and hold water for the lake. They haven't funded it the way it needed to. You saw the governor propose last session $16 million to buy water for the lake, and the legislature appropriated $1 million. So, and then on public lands, I got money to support the tribes in Bears Ears area, the Bears Ears National Monument area, to create a visitor center. But we're making only an economic argument. We're not talking about the boundary fight over the monument or really cultural issues. We just said, hey, this could help the tribes economically and it will help the surrounding communities economically. Teamed up with Phil Lyman. Some of you may know who he was, remember? Cynthia and I went down and stayed with Phil at his house in Blanding, spent the weekend visiting with some tribes, and we got that bill through. And that's moving forward slowly because it's been a effort to build the confidence to work with the state. Because if you're a native, if you're a member of an indigenous group in this country, and someone comes from Salt Lake and says, "We got a good idea for you," that hasn't always worked out very well. So they're right to be slow and careful, but they have, I think, finally seen the notion that they can help use the help from the state to move forward with the visitor center. We're working on a similar idea for a dinosaur visitor center and Grand Staircase. The world-class fossils come out of that, and they come to Salt Lake and to Denver. In fact, if you saw the most recent Jurassic Park, you saw a dinosaur that came to life and only is found in Grand Staircase. So what the theme here is, if you have an economic argument to do something, it gets listened to. So we're not going to fight in the legislature about what good boundaries are for these monuments, whether they should be conserved or not. But we can find common ground if we say, hey, these are resources that can generate income for local populations. And I think obviously that trend would be to tamp down hatred for the monument, help people see they can be economic engines. That's also the point behind the economic point is the impetus behind my pushing for outdoor rec development in the state, because You may say, if you're a tree hugger like me, hope nobody quotes me on that. If you're a tree hugger like me, you see a mountain and it's beautiful, that's enough for me to want to hang on to it. But if you were talking to a Republican who might say, hey, there's some coal under there, maybe we need to dig that out. And if you can show them economic numbers that say, let's put a trail on it and leave it alone, because in the long run, that mountain will make more money for the Utah economy in the long run than if we dug out the coal and lost the mountain. So that's the kind of point we're trying to make with the economic analysis of outdoor rec. And now this nonprofit I started that Steve mentioned, we're working with Silicon Slopes, which is entirely driven, that industry, the tech jobs in Utah, 1 in 7 jobs, is entirely succeeding here because the people they recruit and retain in Utah want to recreate. They want to mountain bike after work, they want to ski before work, and they want to take their kids skiing on the weekend. So their business model depends on recreation being a vibrant segment of the economy. And really, it's much huger. If you take an example, you drive down Draper Way on I-15 and you'll see Lucid Software, and you think, oh, that's a tech company. Carl's son, who is the executive who formed that company, put it here in Utah against the request of his investors to put it in Silicon Slopes. He put it in Draper because he wanted to ski before work. So 800 software engineers have a job in Draper because one guy wanted to ski before work. So those 800 jobs really should be put in the column of Utah's outdoor rec potential, which is basically the same as let's conserve these public lands for the use of the people. There's emerging economic evidence this is true. People know it anecdotally. We're trying with Silicon Slopes to put a number on that to really value, because you'll see outdoor rec, the industry itself will say, oh yeah, we're 4, 5, 6% of the economy. But they're counting, that's manufacturing climbing gear in my district, Black Diamond, or Patagonia retailing stuff and things like that. That's directly a contribution to GDP. But this indirect but very real number needs to get measured. And so we're going to measure that, and then we're going to present to the legislature, hey, did you know that outdoor rec really accounts for 50, 60, 70% of the economy? And we got some asks. We want more parks. We want more trails. We want more active transportation routes. We want connectivity with trails between our workplaces and our homes. So there's some obvious stuff that needs to start asking for. So when you, on Capitol Hill, very much smaller economic interests don't really get a lot. Like ag, people think Utah is an ag and mining state, at least the old boys often imagine that's what it is, and it isn't that. If you look at the actual numbers, we are not that anymore, but historically we have been. And a lot of folks feel fondly for these industries, and they're very well organized and very communicative about what they want, and they get what they want. And so we need to get this other voice that's a huge economic player to start asking. They're not present on Capitol Hill. The Farm Bureau has 3 or 4 lobbyists there every minute of the session. The Mining Association has at least that many every minute of the session. Every other industry that you think of as sort of working at cross purposes with some conservation things, they're very well represented. So we need some economic voices, because the Sierra Club, or Sahara Club as they're called up there, us rock lickers and tree huggers, we don't get what we ask for. It's just philosophically out. But if you start talking that economic message, and we'll come to some specifics about how to try to employ that for the lake and other issues. So there have been a lot of successes. There is a picture that in the last few years, not much has been done to help the lake. A lot has been done. There's some big shortcomings still to work on, okay? We're a little schizophrenic. We say we want to save the lake. We also say we want to develop inland port. We have now hugely accumulated hundreds of I think it's a couple $100 million now, in funds that have been derived from a special taxing district to spend on subsidizing development of transshipment union resources, which I think of as sort of glorified warehouse transshipping. It's kind of cool, but if the private sector wants to do something like that, have at it. Let's reduce costs of transportation. That's nothing wrong with that. Why the government should be subsidizing that is an entirely an issue entirely lost on me. The private sector should absolutely be able to take care of its own shipment issues. And the problem is that the last remaining land to develop to do this is on the south and east shores of the Great Salt Lake. Now, it's expanded beyond that. They're saying that they're going to delineate the wetlands and not build on those. I think that is unlikely to be successful, because I think anybody who knows much about wetlands knows if you have a bunch of infill, you're going to end up inevitably degrading the wetlands around the little higher areas. I think that is schizophrenic to pursue a policy like that. The other big problem is that to actually put more water in the lake, which is what has to happen, you have to do one of two things. You have to buy and hold the water. I trust you can hear me, right? I'm talking around this mic. You have to buy and hold water. That's what the Great Salt Lake Trust was set up to do. But it hasn't been funded adequately to do that, and there have been a lot of administrative headaches because we can get into that, but there's a lot of administrative headaches to ensuring if you buy a farmer's water that it will actually go to the lake. Because if you, for example, most of the drainage of the lake comes in the Jordan or the Bear, but if you're a farmer high in those systems, the water will go, if you let your water go downstream, it can go into a lake, and then someone else can have a right to take water out of that lake or reservoir. So you have to deal with the actual issue of tracing water, which can be very complicated. So there's impediments administratively, and there's impediments financially, because to actually buy the quantities of water that the Great Salt Lake Commissioner, Brian Steed, who's a wonderful ally for the lake, you should feel confident that there's really good, dedicated public servants working on this, like the head of Water Resources, Candace Hasenjager, Joel Ferry, the head of DNR, wonderful, dedicated public servants who are very genuinely interested in seeing this lake survive. I've traveled to Owens Lake with them. I've seen them up close and personal. And you should have that confidence that there are good people working on this, of all political stripes. Let's see. Oh yeah, so you got to do one of two things to save the lake. You got to buy and hold water, or you have to conserve water and dedicate the conserved flow to the lake. Those are the only two pathways that are going to generate the quantities of water that will go to the lake. I told you I'd got some money for split season water leasing, which is a lot of farmers late in the season the economic utility of alfalfa farming, which is over 90% of our ag in the state, is reduced, and some of them would be willing to let their water go downstream. Again, we need an administrative mechanism to make a payment to them and let them flow their water downstream. You'll still go around in this state, notwithstanding a huge change in water law, that dedicating water to the lake for conservation purposes is now deemed a beneficial use. 7 years ago, it was not legal to hold a water right to benefit a conservation purpose, because that was never the way Western water law evolved. That got changed. That was a huge change. But anyway, that split season water leasing is never going to generate the quantities of water we're talking about that need to go to the lake. We're talking 500,000 to 1 million acre feet of new water that needs to get to the lake to reach a sustainable level. So there's two problems with either of these two policies. They cost a lot of money if you buy and hold water, and you're pitting the economic interest of the lake against who else wants to buy water? Well, farmers, they own it, so you got to pay them for it. So the ag doesn't like water share price going up, because they want to transact in water and they don't want to lose it, and they feel like their margins of profit in ag are pretty slim, and any kind of increased cost can really do them in. Developers want to buy water when they want a new development. They have to buy it from the ag interest, usually is how it works. And so they don't want to pay more for that water. And the other people who want to buy water are the big water districts that supply water to you. They need to have water to let you brush your teeth. And so they see the population growth around here is frightening at one level, because we just have limited water, energy, clean air. hiking pathways, you name it, right? The population growth has been a formidable challenge in our state over the last 25 years. And so you're pitting that economic interest against very powerful economic interests that don't want to see that happen. Now, conservation has been a little bit of a different issue, and I've been trying to pick at this issue with some success and some failure. And I got to keep track of the time, Steve. I'm supposed to be about 30 minutes. Oh yeah, so we got to wrap up here in about 5-10 minutes. Oh, well, we won't do that long. I wouldn't do that too. My mother always said, people like a great talk and they really love a short talk. So you're going to get a short one. But the conservation issue has been hit and miss. I got a bill through that said if you're doing a new government building, a school, a county, city building, you got to use water efficient landscaping when you do it, which had one basic idea, which is don't have grass, which people overwater, and even when they water it properly, it uses more water than a drip system that go into a tree or a shrub. Get a lot more bang for your buck on a tree and shrub for urban cooling and landscaping than you do with sod. And got that bill through, but when I tried to expand it this last session to new commercial, industrial, or institutional construction, it got a big thumbs down. And I think we have reached the tolerance for attacking non-functional turf. There's a few turf farmers in this state that have an outsized influence. And I think we're bumping up against a Republican philosophy, which is let's not micromanage, let's attack the problem from other economic angles. So they don't want this command and control type of philosophy spreading any further. So that's the problem we were up against with the failure this year. So you couple the economic, so I wanted to tell you, so on conservation, the big action on that has been the Ag Water Conservation Program, where the state will match money that a farmer puts in to optimize the irrigation systems, typically is what it is, to use less water. The problem has been the state has not been willing to say, and when we give you all that money, we want some of that saved water. They've not been willing to say that. And so hundreds of millions of dollars have gone into this. Who's that masked man there? Is that who I think it is? Yeah. Good to see you. You can wear it if you want. I didn't. I just wanted to see who it was. I thought that was you, Bert. So you're getting me distracted now. So the state's not wanted to say we get some of that water. And to me, you ought to say, well, let's give the farmer 50%, so they're motivated, and let's take our 50%. And the problem is, the way it is now, a farmer could say, wow, thanks for that $100,000 project. I put my 100 in, we got a $200,000 improved irrigation system. I never had enough water to irrigate my other field, now I do. And so I'm gonna irrigate that. You actually hardened up the water demand and the depletion. And so, or the farmer downstream could say, wow, there was never enough water in the stream for me to get my water right out. Now there is, because Joe up the hill did that project, now I can water my field. So this is fallen into disfavor for good reason, because we were spending money without understanding clearly what benefit would be derived to a conservation purpose. And we should not spend money, in my view, anymore on that, because it's illusory to think that we're going to just pay people to conserve and that eventually it'll add up and help the lake. That's just too diffuse, too attenuated. So and that's a philosophical problem, not so much an economic one, which is I'm not sure I understand the roots of that. I try to understand it. I don't really get it. One problem with it is it has not worked yet anywhere else. Oregon has tried it. It's not been successful. The farmers are afraid of it, don't want to do it. And so we're plowing new ground, and I think there's just hesitation there. I try to understand what people's motives are. I don't always get it. I'm working on that. Then we have structural political problems, okay, that are national, that play out here. We are not governed by what the will of the majority is in this country. We are governed by the will of the majority of whichever party wins the election, which is a minority. In my dad's day, when a politician won an election, they knew that the election ended and they should go to work across party lines to effectuate good policy. And the great enduring progress our country has made over time has been when there's been bipartisan steps. There's an old adage in politics, complete victory, total victory spells eventual defeat, because you have to take account of differing viewpoints to have a stable policy direction change that lasts. Okay, that's just I think it's absolutely true adage in politics. And we are seeing the majority of the majority is rather extreme. And there are a lot of moderates. When I got elected, I fully expected that it might be a waste of time and I would not run for a second term. But I found that there are almost all of the people in the legislature, and I'm talking about the Republican majority, almost all of them are very rational, center-leaning people. They're conservative, but they can understand rationality and they're well-intentioned. What the problem is that even the rational ones are afraid of a challenge from their right in a primary. And wonderful people have gotten beaten in the 3 elections I've run. Wonderful people have been lost to the legislature by crazy upstarts in the, I shouldn't use the word crazy, but I mean, a more wild variant of the conservative party that beats them in a primary, or usually at convention, because people aren't taking full advantage of the count my vote advantages to run a primary, and they get thrown out in a convention. Some of them just decide not to run because they're getting too many challengers. So some really wonderful conservative but moderate thinking, rational, just deal makers, that are losing ground, and they're afraid of losing ground. So rational people will sometimes, if you can't bottle it up in committee and it gets to the floor, they've got to vote. They're pushed in a corner and they're going to vote, some of them the wrong way. A lot of them, most of them, almost all of them. They're going to vote the wrong, if they get pushed in a public way. So you need to have the processes with enough strength of the numbers to keep the bad stuff bottled up that doesn't publicly force people into voting wrong. And so there's a lot of gamesmanship like that gets played, and you hope it does, because it saves people from being afraid of challenging from the right. So there's that big structural problem, and it's a failure of our partisan politics. Also, the developer's interest is very strong, and again, I think it's less venal than people think it is. It's just people need houses. We have the first or second fastest growing per capita population in the country. People want to have a house, and we want our kids to have houses. We have a lot of kids. We want them to have a house near us, hopefully. And we also import a lot of people because we have fast growing industry. So about half our growth is homegrown, half our growth that comes from out of state. So the developers are representing that economically. They're the one who profit from building a new house. So they're there saying, hey, you got to make some policies friendly to this interest. And anyway, that just, we're up against some structural problems. So we got to make this is all pointing us to where you come in. We can make a difference most effectively by pushing economic interests to support lake conservation. And you can do it. The logic is there. We need a viable place to live. We can't lose all our property value. We don't want to have health issues, or we can't get people to move here to take our new tech job, or whatever it is. You've got to have a livable environment. And so you can say there's a health issue, and if you're not into the birds, which people like me are, but if you're not into that, let's turn it into dollars and cents, and say we don't want to see our property values destroyed and all of us move out of state, have unlivable dust conditions. And so the tip of the sword on this is an organization which it has such a generic name I can hardly remember it. It's something like the Great Salt Lake Business Coalition. It's very close to that, run by Tim Hawks, who was a wonderful member of the majority party who retired and now is an attorney for the brine shrimp fishery. Wonderful guy. And you can email him if you want to know this, thawks@gsla.us. Send him your name and hopefully your business name. If you're affiliated with a business or you can move your employer to do this, say, we want to be part of this business coalition that is going to push for lake conservation. I think that's the number one thing to do. You can also join a group like Audubon or Friends of the Great Salt Lake, or there's some others out there, Grow the Flow. Some environmental groups in Utah that get listened to nationally do not get listened to locally. They are viewed as overly strident. And I'm not passing my own value judgment on them. I'm telling you the value judgment that others pass on them on Capitol Hill. So, some of the others I didn't name, Sierra Club or Utah Rivers, and there was an affiliated group. They're a needed voice in our state, but they don't get listened to. So I'm exaggerating that, but not by a lot. They have political issues that the other groups have avoided. So if you want, Audubon Nature Conservancy is the other one that gets listened to very intently on Capitol Hill, I would say. So you get affiliated with a group and just be aware of how they land politically, and you can find your voice in those groups. Because groups get attention where individuals don't. And individuals do get attention if you're writing your legislator. I assiduously pay attention to a constituent's email, and I think that's uniformly true of people there. Less so if it's not, we don't have the resources to respond to everything. But I'm guessing a lot of you live where Democrats are already representing you, so emailing your legislator may not be the most useful, may not effectuate the most change, is what I'm saying. We need to find our friends who live in Republican-represented areas and have them email their legislators. But talk economics. So if you're in a chamber of commerce, or if you're in the realtors, whoever, say, we got to start agitating about the lake. We got to have a livable economy. We got to have a livable place to have an economy. Let's start raising our economic voices to make a bigger difference here. So I'm going to stop there, and we can go as long as you have the stomach to go, but I'll quit there and then let you take it back, Steve. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Owens. We're going to pass the plate now, and after that, I have a few announcements, and then we will go to the Q&A. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I want to make a few announcements. First of all, today, 20 minutes or so after we're done here, there's going to be the Immigration and Justice Committee is going to be meeting, and that's going to be back here in the sanctuary, but do get your coffee first. Also, in 2 days from now, on Tuesday evening at 6:30, there is a Know Your Rights training related to immigration. This evening, there's a potluck at 5:30 with a summer sundown service at 6:15. And we are also working with Crossroads Urban Center. We are doing our best to compete for the Golden Celery Award. Please bring your canned and non-perishable goods. In Elliott Hall, we have boxes for that. And whichever congregation has the most food relative to their attendance wins that trophy. We'd love to have that. Next week, July 20th, Zach Frankel from the Utah Rivers Council is going to be leading the summer forum. It's going to be Fact versus Fantasy for the Great Salt Lake and Colorado River. There's all sorts of other things going on that's listed in the torch. There's a sing-along, there's various circle suppers that have availability. There's a gathering of the Women's Circle. We're continuing with our burrito making and street Tai Chi. So, lots of things that you can be doing. So now we're going to take Q&A. Lee is going to bring you the mic. Please speak into the microphone. For one thing, people on Zoom, can't hear you unless you do. Also, people who are using hearing-assisted devices need that. And if you are on Zoom, you are also welcome to put a question into the chat, and Tristan will signal to me when we have someone. So, yeah. So, Leslie. Right here.
Also, if anyone in the balcony has a question, if you could help me out and come down, I'd appreciate it.
Hi. First, I just want to invite you to the environmental ministry table after this. And one of the things environmental ministry has been doing is helping people have ideas for writing to their legislator. And so there's materials on sort of an outline as to how you could approach that. But then I did have a question, Representative Owen. I thought it was very interesting. You said that it seems like a strategy would be not to let things get to the floor because that's kind of, it pushes legislators and they vote wrongly, you said. So to me that says to approach topics when they're in committee or maybe before that. So how do we do that? How do we keep it behind the scenes so people aren't embarrassed and encourage them to move in a direction?
Well, that's usually a function of a lobbyist with a relationship to speak to the people and try to steer it. And so that's why I think those economic players, if you can get the realtors, speak through the realtors or speak through Tim Hawk's business organization or others, I think that's where that voice gets into the mix. And I was pleased to hear you're having Zach Frankel here, wonderful guy. I didn't mean to demean his organization. He is sounding a note in the orchestra that needs to be played in Utah. So don't get me wrong. It's just certain environmental groups are viewed as strident, and you know he's willing to punch you in the nose, and that has benefits and it has drawbacks. So I love Zach, and he's making some useful, very useful points. I wanted to point out my wife Cynthia, who came in. I see you up there. Just celebrated 33 years of marriage. Cynthia, stand up and say hi. And I wanted to add one last thing, and we'll go over here. Or is it Q&A now, or are we still doing announcements?
No, it's Q&A.
Okay. So, well, it morphed seamlessly from announcement to, I didn't know if we had to. I did want to add a note that I'm optimistic. Like this is a big challenge. We see globally, this is a big challenge. We got challenges. There are reasons why it should work, and it's not going to depend on the heroism of politicians, because politicians, by and large, are not heroic. We're not really much of a leader. What we are is brokers, right? We take the interests and try to make a deal that settles a situation or an issue. And there's structural reasons why the lake should be saved. And I think it's these economic interests that are starting to be lifted up and understood better. This is going to have big economic impacts. The ski industry makes noise. The tech industry is going to start making noise. And other voices, you know, who's going to want to buy a house from a developer if you're going to have a dust plume riding down your throat, your kids, you know. So there's the economic players. I think the LDS Church holds a lot of water, and it is given a chunk of water. I was talking to Jeffrey earlier. I saw you out there, Jeffrey. I think it was a little more than you were remembering. I thought it was in the neighborhood of 25,000 acre feet. And it was proximate to the lake. It didn't have the issues of getting the water to the lake. It was proximate to the lake. Rio Tinto's given water to the lake. So there are major players that have water that are interested in seeing the survival of this community. And so I have confidence that we will get there. And there have been huge changes. People, even though we're still struggling with the lake level, there have been huge changes and upending of traditional 150-year notions of water law that have been made in the last 4 to 5 years, and there will be, I'm convinced, more to come. And so anyway, we've talked about the challenges, but I did want to sound a note of optimism there.
I want to go first to somebody who's on Zoom.
Yeah, we've got a question here from Colleen on Zoom. She writes, does it do any good for us to write to legislators who are not our personal representatives? I know that both my senator and representative do support efforts to save the lake and other environmental issues. Both are Democrats. But what about everybody else?
Well, less so, unless you're part of a group. If you're saying, I'm writing you from Nature Conservancy and we want this, I think it's hard to individuals. Yeah, it matters, but not a heck of a lot. I'd say try to adopt a bigger voice that makes you sound bigger than you really are, because we all are. That's what we all are trying to do.
Okay, we're going to go in the back. Over.
What about evaporative coolers like the old swamp coolers? I live in a community up in Layton that's got quite a few of these swamp coolers on top of the homes. Is there a way that they could incentivize people on switching those out to central air, or the ones that don't use water?
That's an interesting question. I'd not heard that issue raised before. I don't know how much water gets used on swamp coolers anymore. When I was a kid, everybody had a swamp cooler in Salt Lake, but now everybody's changed. Let me tell you where I think the lowest hanging fruit is, and that is converting ag land to irrigated yards. Okay? That's where the action is. The water districts tell us that 60% of the water delivered to a single family house is used outside and is 100% depleted. Say that again. Over half the water going to a house is used in the summer months to keep their landscape green. And it's 100% depleted. It does not go deep enough to get in the aquifer to go to the lake. This is established science according to a lot of people. But when you use water in the house, and evaporative coolers would be an exception to this, 90 to 95% of the water you use in a house, if you're in the drainage of the Great Salt Lake, goes down the sewer to the lake. So it's not your indoor water usage that's the problem. It's only 40%, and 90 to 95% of that will get to the lake eventually as treated sewage. And so the real low-hanging fruit is to go after non-functional turf, which I've had spotty success with that. But that's what's happening, is the water usage is converting in our state from ag at a very rapid pace to M&I, municipal and industrial, and that's mostly outdoor water usage. And we just don't need it. We're not England, People have a hard time understanding. But so we have to do a couple things on that front. One is to fight the notion that we're saying you can only have rocks. If you go to Las Vegas, people think it's ugly as sin. And it is. People just put out some gravel and they're done. If people think that's what you're arguing, and there's a lot of notion that has to be dispelled, because a lot of people do think that's what you're talking about with xeriscape or water-wise landscaping. I prefer the term water-efficient landscaping. They think you're just saying we can only have rocks. No, you're saying you get more bang for your outdoor water gallon if you drip it to a tree or a shrub than if you irrigate your turf. That's all we're saying. So please think about how much spray irrigated turf you want to have. If you're not going to walk on it, don't have it. If it's just visual, put in something else. It's been a real hard notion to take hold around here. And it's an essential piece of the mix. So I'm going to write down evaporative water coolers. I'd love to see some numbers on how much water we're losing that way. Generating electricity uses water too. You'd be surprised to know. Some people are surprised to know that. So it's not, I don't know, it may be a mixed bag. We'd have to do some math and see. But the real low-hanging fruit is the outdoor water usage. We really need, so convert your grass. If you're not using it as grass, if you're not walking on it. I sadly drove down the west side of Utah Lake last summer, and there's lots of big McMansions going in, 7,500 square foot houses right on the lake shore on the west side in those Saratoga Springs area, Eagle Mountain. And they're putting in wall-to-wall grass. on these new houses, and they're sitting right in front of the lake that's going to get lost from that water usage. And these are big houses. These aren't starter houses with little kids playing on that grass. Maybe the grands come over once in a while, but I don't see people using these lawns. So anyway, sorry.
All right. Go over here.
How many of us live?
Wait, hang on. Need a mic.
Actually, go. How many of us live in HOA communities? Just give me a show. Okay, not just me and you. 3 of us. Okay. Well, trying to find solutions. I'm thinking of the water waste in my community. We can notify our HOA people to try to influence that. I'm also wondering, is there an incentive in this state to convert lawns to desert plants?
Yeah.
In San Diego, they do that, and so we do have that incentive. So they'll pay us to have cactus come in?
By county.
By county. How about Summit County?
Well, you apply to your water, whoever sells you your water. If you're in the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, you apply through them. Salt Lake City runs one. The state, I worked with Scott Sandel to get money for the state match to the water district dollar. It was $1 a square foot. Now it's $2 a square foot. The problem is it's terribly underfunded. So about $20 million a year. It's way more expensive to retrofit a lawn, to take out grass and reinstall drips. It's marginally more expensive to install a drip the first time. So what we really try to do, and what I was trying to do last year, is say when you're doing new construction, do water efficient landscaping. That's the one great thing. Retrofitting is going to take a long time. It actually makes economic sense to do it. But it's a lot less economic sense than just saying, let's be careful when we install landscaping. So I'm trying a new attack for next year, because people don't want to see another attack on non-functional turf directly, so we're doing it indirectly. And that is to say, when you build a new house and you're going to supply the water to the house, you got to have a water budget for that house. And if they go over that water budget, they pay a tremendously high penalty. And that water budget is going to be set at a level that's going to require water efficient landscaping when they put it in. They don't want to see grass. It's a long story and sad. But if we can go at it indirectly, we're having a run at that now.
Okay. Right over here. Right behind you.
I'm wondering if there's any effort to tap into the tourism value of the Great Salt Lake. I'm a native of Salt Lake, and in my 76 years, I had never gone to the Great Salt Lake because I always heard it was buggy and it was hot and it was all these bad things. Well, we had people come with the Gina Balcar International competition, and they wanted to go to the Great Salt Lake, or they wanted to go to Antelope Island to see the buffalo. And the same thing happened when we were hosting people from the Utah Diplomacy Group. It seems like the Great Salt Lake has had a lot of because of the concerns that nationally, even in the New York Times, there have been stories about it. And I was just thinking that if there is some way to look at the tourism value, economic value of the Great Salt Lake.
That is a beautiful thought and a very underutilized resource. And it has begun to be tapped. There's an IMAX film being produced on the lake that the state is doing, and it's going to be shown in the new Antelope Island Visitor Center, which is going to be a very much larger thing than if you've been out there and seen the old one. There is a Great Salt Lake State Park, which is not on Antelope Island, and I'll bet you none of you know about it. Do you know? Tim knows. It's by the old marina on the south tip. And it's a really bad visitor center. And it's just off I-80. You think it's like a pit stop with a map stand. It's not much more than that. I think they have a little tank of brine shrimp. The birding is where the money is, tourism, outdoor rec potential, right? This is world-class flyways. We could get weepy if we start talking about the critical habitat, for these incredible creatures that migrate all the way up north and all the way to the tip of South America. And they've got to have this flyway or their populations are going to just collapse, This is Democratic talk now, not Republican talk. So, it's begun to be tapped, but it's only a beginning. And what we need to do is, if you go to Mono Lake, which is a very different experience in California compared to Owens Lake, which is just a dust remediation. Owens Lake is an engineering project. There's no lake. Mono Lake has been gotten almost out of trouble, and that's an oversimplification, but that's a good summary. It's almost out of trouble. It's much smaller, but it has a very vibrant community ownership. There's some really good nonprofits that have taken hold, and that's where we're falling down. So Friends of the Great Salt Lake, we need to give more mojo to Friends of the Great Salt Lake and other organizations like that can help lift it up and become a communitarian ownership, and that will spread. It does need to be, every member of Audubon should get flyers and video clips and things relating to Great Salt Lake and say, hey, this is where you need to donate to buy water. And we're not really set up we can take money as a donation, but we're not really campaigning. There's room for action there, and I'm trying to work on that, as are others. So it's a great notion that, and a good place to put some of your energy if you want to get involved.
So with that, first of all, I want to say that our congregation donated about $45,000 to the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
We have another question online.
Thank you for this informative talk. Do you recommend people join together to hire a lobbyist? Are you aware of an example of any other citizenry group that has done this?
Well, I think you go through the ones that there's already good existing friends there. I don't know that you need to hire a new one. I mentioned those groups: Audubon, Nature Conservancy, Friends of the Great Salt Lake, Grow the Flow. Zach Frankel's organization just has a different approach, but a good approach, a useful approach, necessary approach. So there's people out there doing it. I think I don't see a lack of lobbyists is the problem.
All right. So we're going to go back here. To the, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Representative Owens. You're one of our heroes.
No, you're kind.
So I'm wondering what it would take for real estate developers to connect the dots between water-wise landscaping and a future livable environment here.
That is a good question. And that's very kind of you to say that about me. I just want to say a very small piece of a very big group of people, very dedicated. And I appreciate the enthusiasm and spirit you're bringing to this. There is such enthusiasm, one would have thought you'd already had your morning coffee. But there are some wonderful people and some strong allies on the other side of the aisle. Yes, that is a critical thing. What the developers want is that marginal cost difference to install the drip from the get-go. And we're costing that out. It's about $2,000 for a small starter house, the marginal $2,000 to $3,000. It's not that much money. But when you multiply it over tens of thousands of houses each year, it starts to add up, and we're working out those numbers, and I'll be pushing that very thing. I did have a bill last year that followed the practice in St. George, which is much more on the Colorado, much more like a Las Vegas situation where they just have they don't have farmers to go buy water from. They have a set amount of water and they have to live on it. So St. George has been really draconian about turf restrictions. And I did a bill last year which got a horrible reception, which was when you're building a new house, you can't put in more than 1,500 square feet of grass. Got a horrible reception, didn't get out of committee. Got bottled up in committee. So I get the medicine I sometimes want to give others.
All right. Let's go to Darlene here.
Okay, I hope this isn't a left field question, but I read in the Tribune a while back, I believe, that they had drilled so deep below in the Great Salt Lake, scientists, and found some body of water.
I read that too, yeah.
And should I be encouraged by that? Do you have any comments on that?
No, that was just a week or two, right? And I have that on my list to look into. I did know there's an aquifer there because the spring that comes up on Antelope Island is not fed from Antelope Island. The aquifer goes under the lake from the mountains east of Bountiful, goes under the lake. There's a freshwater aquifer that flows. I didn't know if you punched a hole, it came up as an artesian well. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Not an artisanal well, but that's the bread. Artesian is the spring, comes up and flows naturally. So I'm all ears on that. Over next interim meeting, I'm going to be looking into that. That's a wonderful, interesting thing. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Lisa and then Mark.
Thanks for all you do, Representative Owens. You mentioned the LDS Church earlier and that they hold a lot of water and they've made a significant donation, but we're running out of time. And so I'm wondering what else can we do to help encourage them to donate more water to Great Salt Lake? That's a tough one, right?
I think they're moving. I am aware of discussions by others that are on that topic. I don't know how to move that faster.
Okay.
They're making a lot of changes on the chapel landscaping and the installation and retrofitting. Yeah, I don't have a clear answer on that. I do know there's discussions ongoing.
Okay.
I mean, this is a problem that's 150 years in the making. We're really only 4 years into the dedicated effort to fix it. And so we have to have some perspective. I mean, one of the problems, and if the church anybody owns a piece of property high on the drainage of the Bear River, the last undammed river going into the Bear Lake, into the Great Salt Lake, which shouldn't be dammed. That's another place we're schizophrenic on because there is an active plan to dam that lake.
Yep.
Or dam that river, I'm sorry. Big mistake that we need to avoid. But if you own a piece of property high in that drainage and you say, I want to let it go, the church or whoever farmer wants to donate it, you have a very hard time, and that's the river they have the most measurement on. You have a very hard time understanding whether that will go to the lake because there's multiple reservoirs that are fed by that they're natural lakes, and some people have a what right to draw if the water's in that lake. So you get your water to the lake, but someone else can pull it.
Right.
So there's trouble like that when you're high on the system. And a lot of the church property is high on the system. So it's just complex. So every year, what we try to do is get more money to the state engineer's office, who's another very dedicated public servant by the name of Teresa Wilhelmsen.
Yep.
Wonderful person. And she needs way more money than she gets because we need to be able to monitor, measure. And when a farmer says, farmers are wonderful around here. A lot of them are excited to give water to the lake. And they will do it if Teresa can say, yeah, I can show you how it will get there. It's very hard to do that in some cases.
Yeah.
So we need a lot more money.
Yep.
Like on the order of $10 to $20 million more. And it's just been hard. And there've been a lot of the macro picture here is with COVID and federal relief, there's been a lot of money. Last year, my fifth session was very different, very tight money. Lot of programs being clawed back. And so, anyway, it's a money issue that would encourage the church and other ag holders to send more water to the lake, I think. But the actual discussion with the church, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm aware of discussions that are happening that I'm not party to that I think are going to produce good results eventually.
Good. Thanks for that. I also wanted to put a plug in for the IMAX film when the Antelope Island Visitor Center opens, because this church's own Youth Coalition for Great Salt Lake is featured in that film.
Oh, is it? Good.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool.
Mark Rotherford.
You guys are glutton for long meetings, but I'll stay as long as you want to ask questions.
Anyway, thank you, Representative Owens, for being here. It seems like such a simple concept. I'm a former banker, and why not just charge more for the water? That the legislature claims to be market-driven, and if things cost more, then people can figure out that it'll cost more to have more grass, and businesses. We back up on a school, the Granite District, waters their lawn 24/7, it seems like. And the other thing is, we ought to publish all the water usage, per person, and show the cost of it so that the neighbors can get after them. So, what's your thought?
Well, going backward, I appreciate the enthusiasm. Going backward, there was an effort a couple years ago to make golf courses publish their water usage numbers. And boy, did that go down fast. I'm not opposed to that. There's others who are opposed to that. What was the first question?
Just raise the cost.
Oh, cost, yeah. So the economics are... the thing I've learned is you think things are simple and they're not, because you pull on one thread and then something happens over here in the tapestry, right? So with cost, a couple things to think about. Number one is 60 to 70% of the water in the drainage of the Great Salt Lake is not no one's charging anything for it because it's owned. The water is owned by the people, but the right to use it is sold as a water right, and those water rights are owned by the farmers. So 70% of the water is 60 to 70% being used with no cost other than when it transfers hands, when you sell the water right. So there's no cost. That can be taxed, very unpopular idea. You can impose fees. There's limited constitutional ability to do stuff like that, very unpopular politically. Farmers are like everybody's grandma. Yes. Okay. So there's that problem. Then you look at the other water and you say, well, let's charge more. And there was an important incremental change made to that, which is you should have tiered water already. You have 4 tiers of water. The top one is clearly you're overdoing it on your outdoor landscape. And that you can now price into all 4 tiers. That was illegal until this year, to price in the value of conservation. Hey, we're going to do the Jordan Valley Water District can now say we're going to do a conservation project. We're going to line that canal with concrete to not have the drainage loss. Okay, they can now pay for that with money. So that's a change, and your water rates will go up accordingly. The problem is when you price it too high, demand drops too much, and then they can't make their bond payments, and you run into, and that's a very heavy debt-laden, it's a very intensive capital project to, the infrastructure to deliver water. And so you actually have to sell the water you've developed, or you get into trouble financially. Well, the answer would be to price it so you don't have to build new infrastructure and develop new water resources, and then just deliver less water to a house or an apartment. It's really going to be the houses. It's the outdoor landscaping is the fat in the system that can get cut. So it's complicated and there's political problems, but you're right. I mean, the economics of it, the people will say we should be like Israel, and just have an economic analysis about when you have a new water usage. Israel had one water user, the state, and they could say where it went. We have 200,000 people who own water rights in the basin of the Great Salt Lake. So it just gets complicated, and then that financing piece wrecks it. So you can't just price it to conserve it. You got to price it to sell it, and so people can make their bond payments, or these people get really alarmed.
All right.
And then if you just jeopardize it, they'll lose a bond rating, and their bond cost goes way up. It's crazy. You bankers have wrecked it.
All right, we have a question in the back here.
I'm bringing it to you.
In the Mormon tradition that I belong to, we have shortened our meetings to an hour. You guys are amazing. You're amazing.
Hi, Representative Owens. It's so nice to hear you speak, and I'm actually not from Utah originally, so I've been to the Great Salt Lake Visitor Center. I'm from Boston, where we had that Boston Dirty Harbor water for reputation for a long time, but I worked on cleaning up the beaches and getting people back to the beaches. So you can do it here. My question is, last year, I think, or the year before, Salt Lake City Public Utilities came, and they actually told us we were having some issues where people were conserving outdoor usage, and then they weren't generating enough money anymore because people were spending less on water because they had done conserve so much. And that was the Salt Lake City Department, and Joan might remember because it was either at a forum or one of the discussions here. So I'm curious, is it just Salt Lake City that was doing better versus at some other parts of the state? Is there any kind of comparison of what areas need to conserve more in the outdoor landscape than others? Because it was kind of surprising. Salt Lake City was saying people had almost done too good of a job that they now all of a sudden didn't have the funding for the projects that they wanted to do. And I don't know if I'm the only one that remembers that, but I just thought I would bring it up.
Yeah, that's an example of the problem I'm talking about. There's a financial reason that you could over-conserve. You got to recoup enough money to make your bond payments and to secure them. It was actually Salt Lake, where I first learned this was Salt Lake's situation. So it can occur anywhere, though, because these projects are expensive, We have one reason we have cheap water here that is an advantage is our water comes in the mountains and it's all gravity flow. You get water from the Strawberry Reservoir that flows by gravity here. There's no electrical pumping. So one reason we have cheap water is we don't have to add energy. It's a great blessing, but also a problem. Everything's complicated, tugging the thread.
We're going to have one last question here.
Severance taxes are used extensively when natural resources are depleted and the product is sent elsewhere. It seems like the lowest of the lowest hanging fruit is exported alfalfa, that which goes to Asia or to Saudi Arabia to feed Arabian horses. And it seems like that would be a simple enough tax to implement, where exported hay, that which is used outside of the basin, would have a much higher tax. It could possibly incentivize alfalfa farmers to sell their land. The state could even buy it, put up solar farms, or they could be incentivized to produce lower water usage crops. Is that kind of thing been entertained?
Well, I haven't heard that discussed, but now with this comment and the other guy who mentioned tariffs, maybe we say, hey, if you export your alfalfa to China, we're going to put a tariff. Maybe Utah can impose a tariff. I don't think so. I don't know. You have to look at I don't know the specifics. It's an intriguing thought. The one thing I've learned politically is you need the farmers as an ally, and really you want them. There's a buy and dry notion that takes place in other states, and they'll buy ag water, and it's happening here to some extent, a little slower. and some other places, buy and dry. You buy the land, sell the water, and the farm dries up, you create a dust issue, and you can decimate your rural communities. And really you lose something, when you take your kids or grandkids, they love to see a farm. We want that view shed. We want the open space. It's psychologically, it's almost as valuable as a park. Even if you can't go on it, you can drive by it. It is vital. I think it's vital to the life of our place, really, that we maintain an ag heritage. Now, so the way you get the water from the farmer to the lake is a complicated question, but a lot of them are willing to. I think there's immense potential for the ag optimization. It's just working out the philosophical and policy reasons. There's intensive ag methods coming from Europe now that are just astonishingly restrictive of water usage. But if we're going to invest that way, we just need to make sure we're conserving the flows, and then you got the measurement issues. So there's just policy that needs to develop, but I think we're going to be where we can do ag optimization projects, get the water, keep the open space, keep the farm. I mean, who wants to see every last bit of farmland in Salt Lake County? We've lost almost every bit of it now. There used to be a lot of it here. Who wants to see that all disappear? And you create a dust issue, and you ruin every rural community in the state. So there are ways that it can be done over time, but there is urgency, as has been pointed out, but it's going to take some time to make it work right. But the water is there, the water is there. We just got to find money and will and political amity to get it done. That's not a very precise answer, sorry. I will explore the idea of a tariff.
Well, thank you, Representative Owens. Let's give him a round.
Nice to be here with you. Thank you very much.